Imagine a grand, sprawling estate called Audley Court. It is the kind of place that defines the Victorian ideal of perfection. A home of high standing, impeccable manners, and a social circle that seems entirely without flaw. At the centre of this perfection is Lady Audley. She is beautiful, charming, and possesses a grace that makes her the jewel of every social gathering. Her husband, Sir Michael Audley, is a man of high reputation, and together they present a picture of domestic bliss that is the envy of their peers. But there is a quiet, unsettling feeling that something isn't quite right beneath the surface of this polished life. It's a sense that the shadows in the corners of the house are a little too deep, and the smiles in the drawing rooms are a little too practiced. This is the world Mary Elizabeth Braddon creates in her 1862 sensation novel, Lady Audley's Secret. To understand how this perfect world unravels, we have to look at the man who begins to pull at the loose threads, Robert Audley. Robert is a barrister, but he is a bored one. He spends much of his time drifting through the London social scene, lacking a sense of purpose or a real passion for his work. He is a man living a life of comfortable idleness until a friend, George Talboys, enters his orbit. George is a man who has returned to England from Australia, carrying the heavy weight of loss. He believed his wife, Helen, had died in the colonies, and he has come home to find a sense of stability. But the arrival of George Talboys sets off a chain of events that Robert cannot ignore. George begins to disappear, and when he does, it isn't just a social disappearance, it feels like a disappearance from life itself. As Robert starts to look into George's whereabouts, he finds himself drawn into a web of connections that shouldn't exist. He begins to notice strange coincidences. He discovers that the radiant Lady Audley had previously lived under the name Lucy Graham, an identity she used as a cover to erase her past as Helen Talboys, the woman George once called his wife. There is also Phoebe Marks, a maid in Lady Audley's household, who shares that same uncanny haunting beauty. The investigation begins to move from the bright drawing rooms of Audley Court into the darker, more labyrinthine parts of the characters' lives. Robert, once so aimless, becomes obsessed. He starts to realise that the Lady Audley everyone admires, the radiant, perfect wife, is a mask. The investigation takes a dramatic turn when Robert discovers a portrait in Lady Audley's private dressing room. It isn't a standard, flattering likeness. The expression in the eyes of the woman in the painting is fiendish, almost predatory. It is a direct contradiction to the soft, angelic woman who sits at tea every afternoon. This portrait serves as the first real crack in the facade, suggesting that the woman the world sees is a carefully constructed performance. As Robert digs deeper, the stakes become life and death. He discovers that Lady Audley's entire identity is built on a foundation of deception. She isn't who she says she is. She has used her beauty and her social climbing to erase a scandalous past, reinventing herself as a member of the aristocracy to escape the consequences of her previous life. The mystery of George Talboys' fate comes into focus, and it is grim. Robert discovers that George wasn't just lost or wandering, he was a victim of a violent attempt on his life. He had been pushed into a well, an act intended to silence him and ensure he could never reveal the truth about Lady Audley's past. It turns out that Lady Audley had orchestrated a chilling scheme. She found a dying woman who looked like her and paid her to impersonate Helen Talboys and die in her place. By faking her own death, the real Helen was able to vanish, reinvent herself as Lucy Graham, and eventually step into a new life of wealth and respectability as Lady Audley. The tension reaches a breaking point during a confrontation in the Lime Walk. Robert, no longer the idle barrister but a man driven by a desperate need for truth, directly accuses Lady Audley of murder. The mask finally slips. The poised, elegant Lady Audley vanishes, replaced by a woman who is hysterical, defensive, and terrifyingly manipulative. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Lady Audley turns her weapons on Robert. She knows that in Victorian society, a man's reputation is his most valuable possession. She attempts to destroy him by painting him as a man who has lost his mind. She plays on the fears of the era, suggesting that Robert is suffering from a hereditary madness, a common fear of the time. For a moment, it works. She successfully convinces Sir Michael Audley that Robert is insane, leaving the investigator isolated and discredited. But the truth has a way of surfacing, often through the very people the antagonist tries to suppress. Robert's persistence leads him to uncover the role of Luke Marks, a blackmailer who had been part of the web of lies. The investigation also reveals a violent act of arson at the Castle Inn, a fire intended to destroy evidence and silence anyone who might have known the truth about Lady Audley's movements. The final unraveling is devastating. The truth is laid bare. Lady Audley is a criminal who has used murder, impersonation, and arson to maintain her social standing. The scandal is too great for the Audley family to survive. Sir Michael, a man who believed he was married to an angel, is left utterly broken by the revelation of his wife's true nature. He is essentially exiled by the shame of the scandal. Lady Audley herself is not sent to a prison, but to a private asylum in France, where she remains a prisoner of the secrets she spent her life trying to hide. In the aftermath, there is a sense of restoration, though it is a scarred one. George Talboys, the man thought to be dead, returns. He survived his ordeal, and though he has been changed by the trauma, he is alive. Robert Audley, having moved from idleness to a heavy, burdensome knowledge of the truth, finds a sense of peace through his marriage to Clara Talboys, George's sister. Clara, who had appeared to be a stoic and perhaps even emotionless figure, is revealed to be a woman of intense passion and iron will, the kind of strength required to survive the wreckage of the Talboys family. When we look back at Lady Audley's secret, it's easy to see why it was such a sensation. It plays with the most profound anxieties of the mid-19th century. At its heart, the novel is a study of appearance versus reality. It asks us to consider how much of the people we think we know is actually a performance. In the Victorian era, the angel in the house, the idea of the perfect, pure and domestic woman, was a powerful social standard. Braddon takes that ideal and turns it on its head, showing how that very standard can be used as a weapon to hide a predator. The novel also touches on the terrifying concept of madness. During this period, there was a massive cultural debate about whether madness was a biological hereditary taint or a social label used to control people. Lady Audley uses the concept of madness as a tactical shield, attempting to use it to discredit Robert. The book leaves us wondering, is the madness in the blood, or is it a tool used by those in power to silence the truth? The setting of the novel also serves a symbolic purpose. Audley Court is described as labyrinthine, with its confusing architecture and hidden passages. This isn't just a description of a house, it's a metaphor for the characters' lives. Just as the house has secret rooms and winding corridors, the characters have secret histories and hidden motives. The domestic sphere, which was supposed to be a sanctuary of safety, is transformed into a site of danger and deception. There is also a fascinating element of class fluidity at play. The physical resemblance between Lady Audley and her maid, Phoebe Marks, is not a coincidence. It's a literary device that suggests the blurring lines between the upper and lower classes. In a rapidly changing society, the ability to mimic a higher social status through appearance and behaviour was a source of great anxiety for the ruling classes. Lady Audley's ability to move between these worlds by changing her identity reflects a world where the old certainties of class were beginning to shift. Some modern readers look at Lady Audley and see a villainous, calculated criminal. They see a woman who manipulated men and destroyed lives to secure her own comfort. But others see a different kind of figure, a woman who, in a society that gave her very little agency, used the only tools at her disposal, her beauty and her intellect, to seize control of her own destiny and her own wealth. Whether she is a monster or a desperate social climber is a question the book leaves for us to debate. Ultimately, the story is about the cost of the truth. Robert Audley succeeds in his mission. He uncovers the secret and brings justice to George Talboys. But the victory is bittersweet. The truth doesn't just reveal the crime, it destroys the world that the crime was committed to protect. The Audley name is tarnished, the family is broken, and the grand estate of Audley Court is left as a silent, shuttered monument to the darkness that once lived within its walls. It's a haunting reminder that the most beautiful facades often hide the most complicated truths, and that once the mask is removed, there is no going back to the way things were.